Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Traverse Area Historical Society's September program. My name is Stephen Siciliano. I'm the president of the board of directors of the society. As we have a few visitors here today, I'd like to just give a quick overview of our society. We are a nonprofit 501c3. Our mission is to preserve, protect, and present the history of the Grand Traverse area. Activities include programs, historical tours, archive support for here in Traverse Area District Library, scholarship support for our middle and high school students in the area who are interested in history and participate in the Michigan History Day, and support of local initiatives to preserve our local history, such as the historic site of our area's first school teacher, Helen Goodale. We are an all-volunteer organization. We have no paid positions, and we are governed by our board of directors who meet monthly, and our meetings are upstairs here in the library, and they are open to the public. Our revenues from membership and donations are what allow for programs like this today. It is my honor today to present this, share with you the program that will be the Burt Lake Burnout of 1900. Our presenter is Deborah Richmond, a proud descendant of the Burt Lake Band of Ottawa and Chippewa Indians. In 2023, she was bestowed the title of Historian of the Burt Lake Band, a title she treats with reverence and dedication. Her unique perspective comes from both education and firsthand experience. Her presentation highlights the challenges, resilience, and perseverance of our people in the face of adversity. Please help me welcome Deborah Richmond.
Thank you. The first thing I'm going to tell you is I'm used to walking around when I talk, so I will try to give this a try because I know I need to be in one spot. As you heard, I am the new historian of our tribe. You may not have heard of the Burt Lake Band before, and that is because we are one of the tribes that is not federally recognized, and there are many of us. So we are a tribe that Michigan has always been made up of bands of Indians, not large tribes. So every band would have, maybe anywhere between 50 to 300 people, depending, and they would, prosper in smaller groups because you would need to be able to spread out resources. You need to not all be in one spot. So it's been difficult when the government wants to recognize the large tribes because there really weren't that. And so some of them have come together and they make tribes, and we're one of the small ones that has not been recognized yet. So we have a specific history that I'm going to tell you about today. This is an event that happened when we were dispossessed of all of our land, and it was in 1900. And we're going to get started. So I have a book that I have, and I'll have them for sale, and they're also available on our website, burtlakeband.org. This is Richard Wiles. He is an author, the author of the book. He is a historian from Petoskey. He was a high school teacher. We're going to show you the book. Thank you, Vanna. So Richard, for the last 10 years, has been researching and working with our tribe because he heard about our story. It's a story that not many people in the area had ever heard of. And when he heard, he wanted to, come to us and find out more about it. Because of many reasons, Native American bands, and I know from our band, are not very, we keep to ourselves. We keep our information close to us because there have been things that have happened, such as this event in the past, that we don't know who we can trust. We also like to tell our own story, so we'll have authors who come to us and ask to information from our archives. We don't have them in a form that are open yet, because again, we are still learning these things. We have a lot of stuff, but I've got a lot of work to do. But Richard came with us in the right way. He came to us very respectfully, and he very quietly, he got to know us, and then he started doing some small projects with us, and so he spent the time to really gain our trust, and it was a heck of a job. I am absolutely enamored of the job he did for be able to work with us as wonderfully as he does. But he spent 10 years getting all the records, finding out all the details of this story. This is a story that when I was a child, I would hear of it a little bit, but I wouldn't hear a lot. Just a second. This is my great-grandmother, Elizabeth Martell Griswold, in 1960s. She is my family member who was very young when the burnout happened. And she lived on Burt Lake. She married a white man, so she, non-Anishinaabe, we call it, and she was able to, they had a farm, they bought property on Burt Lake just before anything, just as it was people starting to come in to settle the area. And she was able to, our family still owns this land. We've been able to pass it down from generation to generation, as other families do, particularly in our area. The resorter people are able to pass their cabins down, and it's a spot where nobody wants to leave. It's a beautiful lake if you haven't been there. But we're very fortunate, because most of the people in our band, that was not the case. When they lived with the tribe, and so when we lost our land, they lost everything as well. So when I was little, I'd hear the older people talking, and we'd say, what are you talking about? And they would say, oh, go away, just go play. We're speaking. And that was very common back then. But I heard him talking about the Indians being burned out. Now, I refer to us as Indians because that is what we always referred to when I was growing up. I now know that of our language, we call ourselves the Anishinaabe, which means the people in our language, which is Ojibwe. But I would hear them say that people down there were burned out, and I didn't really know what that meant. A few years later went by, and I'm older, and then I start getting more details. These were people who were living not far from where my grandma's house was, great-grandma's house, and their village had been burned down, and they were Indians, and they were part of my family. And I was part of a Native American band, unbeknownst to me. But I knew Grandma was Indian, so I was learning. Now, as I tell you the story, I'd like to show you, these are not great images. They're blurry, but they're the best we have right now. We've got some work to do as far as digitizing images and tracking down things. But this is one we have of the Parkey family. I like to show you the people in our family, and this would have been around the time of the burnout, because whenever I tried to find information about this burnout and learn more, I was a kid who liked to read a lot, and so I'm always looking for, what can I read about this? Never could I find anything, and it took me a while to realize I was never going to find much information about it. But what I did find would be little articles or newspaper pieces here and there. They would always talk about the two non-Anishinaabe men who did perpetrate this, we call it a crime, this event, and they never would talk about the names of the people. And I just, time and time again, I would say, like, who's there, what families, and we never did. So now when I tell the story, and when we tell the story in the book, we will show you the pictures of our families, because it's important that they have faces, that they have names. That's one of the ways in which we can now tell the story and show you that, yes, this did happen the way we have always said it did. So the Parkeys are in front of a log cabin, and this is a large family. They all would have lived in the cabin. And we've got, I believe we have a husband and wife, and then we have an older son with his wife, a younger brother, and then the children of the younger couple. And it was a good life in Burt Lake. So this is at a time when we live in log cabins. Before that time, we lived in wigwams that were non-permanent structures that we could move around when we needed to different places depending on the season. And when settlers started coming in, we were given, we were put under a lot of pressure you need to be like us, you need to assimilate. One of the things that was happening then was lumbering was starting to come in, and as lumber was available from the sawmills, then our family said, all right, we're going to build log cabins and stay in this one village. And I'll tell you more about that as we go. This is the Shenandoahs. And this is a wonderful story. I don't know if you can see, but the young girl in the front on the right, she has this very suspicious look in her eye, but she's curious at the same time. But again, this is a nice traditional family. They do not wear I've asked, why do they wear the American clothes, European clothes, and that is because at this time in history they would have been wearing, clothes like everyone else. Again, we knew that we're being constantly told we need to start living the way the outside people do. So I'm going to start the story in 1836. This was our chief. There was a famous painter, and I can't remember his name right now, who painted a lot of the headmen from Michigan, and we're very lucky to have an image of our chief from that time, Shingasamoon, which means big sail. He was the one who went to Washington. So the US government wanted to start talking to us about buying all of Michigan. They bought some of it, but not a lot. So in the green is the area they came to all of us and said, we want to talk to you about a treaty. We need the leader of each one of your bands, and we need you to come to Washington. And we will, if we can figure this out so you can stay on your land in small reservations, you won't have to be moved out west. Because years before this, the Native Americans from the South had the Trail of Tears, where they were forced to move out to the west, where it was not a good living. They did not have the type of vegetation they needed and animals and things to have such a good living. We did not want that to happen. We'd heard of it, and so all of the tribes, all of the bands did send their main person down. You could say he's a chief. We kind of don't call them chiefs, but for purposes and intents, yes. They would send their chiefs down. And they would pick the person who is a good speaker. And so there were several. I mean, I think there is at least 20 of them. I haven't counted them. But they all went down, and I can't imagine what a trip. They had to go down by canoe. And it would be a heck of a trip to go down to Washington, D.C. by canoe, but they got there, they knew this was important. And so they spent some time before the signing of the treaty talking together and talking with the government officials about the negotiating. What is it they want to know? What do each of you want for your band? And let's talk about that. And so there are notes from the treaty that will tell us each man who was there what he asked for. So we know that Shingasamoon asked for 1,000 acres for our village. We, at the time, had a village of about 25 families, and these are large families, and we were right on Burt Lake shoreline. And they also talked about, you want us to become farmers, so we're going to need some farm equipment. You want us to speak like you and be educated like you, so you need to send us teachers. Because we understood by this time that we need to do this. We need to start fitting into the world around us, because all of the settlers had come in, and it was clear this world for us was changing. And so they signed the treaty. We asked for 1,000 acres, and then we also asked for a blacksmith, all of these things, and there were annuity monies that were to be paid each year. And many of those things we did not get. We did not get a blacksmith. We did not get any kind of equipment. We did not get a teacher. There was some annuity money, but we did get our 1,000 acres. And so we signed the treaty. The treaty was signed so that, and it stated in it that the tribes would have their reservation lands in perpetuity, forever. We understood. We had an interpreter with us. Not all of us spoke English well at the time. We had an interpreter with us who was a very highly educated man from the Native American community, and his mother was French, and so she insisted that he be sent to Rome to be educated, and so he was a scholar, a very good scholar. So we knew exactly what was being told to us and what we were telling them. They knew. And so what happened was, after the treaty was signed and everybody went home, then we found out that when this this treaty went into Congress, Congress decided, no, that should not be forever. It's only supposed to be for 5 years. So they were saying, okay, you can have reservation land, but it's just 5 years. Well, that's absolutely crazy. We've already signed the treaty. And so gray areas began from that day. So this is Augustine Hamblin, and he is the scholar who was our interpreter. He did many things for our people, and they could rest assured they understood what was happening because of his help. So we have the land they've given us, excellent. We're living along, and then the settlers are still trying to. And this is 1836. 1837, Michigan became a state because we did give them all the land. It became a state. Settlers started coming in, and they came in much faster than we thought they were going to. They just came barreling in from many different countries. So we have settlers that were our first settlers from the area, from Germany, from Poland, from Italian, many different places. But there were so many of them. They would come in and they would start establishing their homestead on our property. So we'd have to go out and tell them this is our property and explain the whole thing, that we have a treaty and your government says this is ours. And so they would move off to wherever they were actually supposed to be. And they it happened again and again and again and again. We had to explain it. So we needed a way to be able to show them very quickly, here's why you can't be here. Because they didn't always believe us if we just tell them. So another thing started happening, and that is timbering. So they started cutting down trees in Michigan for lumbering. And when they started that in the 1800s, they cut down all the trees. And so they started doing that on our property, and so that was very alarming. We had to get out there. We had to stop all these crews from doing that. And so we were trying to find out, what can we do? We talked to the priest who would visit, Catholic priest who would visit and have services in our church a couple times a month. And then we also talked to the Indian agent in Mackinac. So these were two white men who know how things work with U.S. government. And what can you tell us? What should we do? They recommended for us to be able to prove to people that this is your property. What we think you should do is we think you should buy some of this property. So we've been having annuity money coming in, and everybody pooled all the money that they had together, that we were going to buy our own property, be that as it may, but we needed to do it. And so they bought 350 acres, and not the 1,000, but this is what they could afford at the time. And they bought it using land patents, which at that time you would buy your land patent, you'd buy this piece of paper, it says that this piece of property is yours. We bought 6 of them, was the 350 acres. And in ours, what we were recommended is that in your patents, it has to say that your land is in trust to the governor of Michigan. These were the magic words that meant to the outer government that this land is reservation land. And the governor would make sure that, yes, these are protected areas. So that was great. They helped us. We got that on there. It was the way it was supposed to go. And so we went home, had the piece of paper for people to see. So after the lumbering settled down, we started to disappear because they'd cut down most of the trees. Then we had land developers who wanted to buy property because now we had people from the southern states like Indiana, south to us, Ohio, Indiana, who were hearing about what a wonderful spot northern Michigan is for a summer home, and that they were actually, advertising to people, and it is a wonderful place for a summer home. We all agree that still, and so these land developers needed land to sell. So if you own a piece of property and you have this piece of paper, you have to pay taxes on it to the local government every year. If you don't, then someone can come in and pay your taxes, and now they own your land, all of it. And so sometimes it would be farmers who had come from another country. They're trying to make a go of it. Farm didn't go well. They can't pay their taxes. They would buy their properties. It was never a fun thing to happen. But this particular man, let's see if he's next. He's not. That I'll show you later. He decided that he wanted our property. Now, this is just showing you that it's not a really good map, but Burt Lake is a beautiful, beautiful lake if you haven't been there, and it's large. And there's just one section of it that forms this peninsula that our village was on. It points to the place where our village was. It was a nice little bay area, so it's very protected. It's very, the fishing is great there. We've got everything we need as far as, maple trees for sugar and animals and plants and medicines, all from nature. And this was a good spot for us to settle, and we'd been there for hundreds of years. And so it was in this area that we had to purchase 350. This is simply, I wanted to show you because the census, we had typed it up so that we can actually see the names. And in 1842, this is a lot of names. But these are people who used to live there. And at that time, your name would be, this is a very Native American name. So Ashkabus. And they would have them spelled out phonetically because we didn't have a written language. And so that's how you'd say Ashkabus, Kekwetu, or Thu. But I like to see this because when we wanted to see how many people were there just a few years before our incident, and we can prove, yes, there are people there, and that we can, one of the very first censuses, we can prove, yes, we were there. This is Charles Massey. He is a man who is working as a lumberer, and many of our men did because sawmill work and lumber work paid good money. It was very close to us, so it was good to do. This is a picture of many people from the tribe. It's one of the biggest pictures of the most people. You have all the children seated in the front, and this very well could be just simply 2 or 3 families. It wouldn't be all of us, but it's just nice for us to have these images of this is the way they would live back then. You see the wagon wheels, and it's a log cabin. And then, of course, we do have everybody's name that we're able to be able to know their names. This is a picture that shows one of the ways that we could make money at the time when European settlers came in and when people came for vacations, is Moses Hamlin is the man in the middle. He's carrying the board, and he is a fishing guide. So we knew where the good fish was, as did many of the white settlers who were there. Some of them also worked as fishing guides, but he's the guy you'd call when you're coming up and you want to go fishing with your buddies. You would go out with him, and he would take you to where to get good fish. He got this big fish on the pole, so he was pretty good at it. And my own grandfather, who was a white man, he also did that type of work. So they go out fishing. Who doesn't like going fishing for the day? And then the men would pay him. This is Francis, Charles, and Sarah Massey. I like this picture because they are working on baskets. Basket making was a large way in which we would make extra money, and these would be black ash baskets. It's a very specific type, trees that come from northern Michigan. Now they're starting to become extinct because they have had a certain blight that has over many years been slowly killing these trees. That's a whole different story. But at that time, we had plenty of them, and we made beautiful baskets. And this is a ship with a steamship with tourists. So from Sheboygan, which is near us, and it's a larger city, people would go for the day. Maybe it's a Sunday. They would go on a trip, and they do sightseeing on a steamship. And they would have different stops they would make along the way. One of their stops was at our village. So they would come in, and we would have all of our baskets ready and leather work, and we also specialized in quill boxes with making out of porcupine quills. So, and jewelry. We had things to sell, and so this was a fun way to get some souvenirs on your trip. And it's just funny, they're all just hanging over the sides of the boat, which looks like they're having a good time. All right, and this is another picture right around that time. This is steamship guests. So you can see the ladies have their bonnets and their white shirts, their long skirts, and you can see the baskets are sitting around in front of them, some of the baskets. So they had nice big baskets they were making. And you'll see, I think, three of the women and a child that are probably are people there who are selling the baskets. You can see them. They're right in front of the white part of the house. And they're wearing dark clothes. And so that's what would be happening that day. And then they like to take a picture. This is a picture of, again, what the houses would have looked like. We built all of our log homes. We built the church that was in the area. We built the fences. We had already been learning to farm. We'd already been farming a little, but now we were learning to do more farming because, again, that's what the government wanted from us. And this is the only picture we have of the village, and it's not a great picture, but it's the only one. But you can see that everybody's got a good space to have their house and their family and their gardens. And there's a man walking down the road. And this is a very precious picture to us. They had a church and they had a cemetery. So the church in the back, our men built that, and it was beautiful. And they have a cemetery there that when we bury our relatives, we use wooden crosses, and we don't use headstones. So you get a wooden cross, and then once a year we go and we put a decorative, they call it a crown. It's a ring of flowers and crepe paper, and it's very pretty as they blow in the wind on the days when we put those out. And another family. Here again, we've got the log cabin. And these are just people who someone came by with a camera, so they said, sure, we'll let you take our picture. And I'm glad that they did, because it's nice to see them. This young man, he's a very young boy, and I think he's probably either working in his garden or he's working with the lumbering. But he's a handsome young guy. So back to our story. So John McGinn on the left-hand side, this is the businessman who was very aggressive with his dealings of how he was lumbering, he was buying properties and selling, he was doing many, many things to make as much money as he could from northern Michigan. And the man next to him is Fred Ming. He is the sheriff of Sheboygan. So John McGinn, by the way, I'm only going to show their pictures once because I don't like their pictures, so you won't see them again. But John McGinn, the village now had their 6 pieces of paper, and there were times when it was very confusing to the local government as far as in Sheboygan, the county, and the tax rolls. Everybody who bought land was on tax rolls and would need to pay their taxes on those pieces, on those land plots. Sometimes they would accidentally put ours in there, because we have the same pieces of paper that say we own it. And we'd have to go up and tell them, they would say, you owe taxes. We would say, no, we don't owe taxes. And we explain to them why we don't owe taxes, and we'd have to, do this many times because they would say, oh, okay, and then they would take you off the rolls, only to find out a couple years later they're saying, you owe taxes or we're going to take your land. So this kept happening. There was one point in which John McGinn was the man who went up and bought those. He saw that they were overdue. He was looking all over northern Michigan for these tax liens that he could buy and grab land. And so he bought ours. Then he told us we need to leave our property. And we said, absolutely we do not. We explained the whole thing to him. He came back a couple times and he was getting very angry. You have to leave. This is my property now. And of course we absolutely refused. We've been living here for hundreds of years. And so what he did is he went to the local judge with his pieces of paper for the tax liens he paid for, and he said, I need to have an eviction notice because I need to evict these people. And the judge, just looking at things, probably didn't know whose property it was at all. Yep, okay, here's your piece of paper to evict them. And so he decided that it wasn't going to be easy to evict us. He knew that. So he went to the local sheriff, which was his friend, Fred Ming. They gathered 20 men and they all got in a wagon or two and they made their way to our property from Sheboygan. Now that day, all of our men were working in the sawmills. We all had jobs there, and the young men as well. And that day, the sawmill owner said, you have to go get your paychecks in Sheboygan today. Because the sawmill was very close to us. It would have been either in Brutus or Pellston, very close to us, 2 miles, 4 miles. But Sheboygan's 20 miles, and so they didn't know why, but they said, all right, we'll do that. And they said, each one of you has to go pick up your own check. So all of the men early in the morning on October 15th, got up early, packed their lunches, and out they went to go to Sheboygan to pick up their checks. While they were gone, this wagon of men with both John McGinn and Fred Ming came to town. They, at gunpoint, I just found information that says that it was at gunpoint, one of the witnesses, they went from house to house, took the women and children and grandparents out. Some people were sick, some people just had a baby, everybody out of the house. All the men were already gone. And so at gunpoint, someone's coming into your house, it's immediate chaos, you don't know what's going on, and these are men you don't know, and they make you leave. So you're bewildered and you're in a group. They then went to every house and poured kerosene on it, and there were about 20 cabins, and then they burned them to the ground. So that meant you're watching your house be burned in front of you, everything you own. And that's not an easy thing to watch. But they had no choice. They were being held at gunpoint. So the men leave, and there they are. It's a cold day. It starts to rain. The men come home in the late afternoon, early evening, and they see what's happened. They cannot believe it. You can't imagine what that would feel like, to come home and the whole place is gone. And your families are very, very upset. I've read a report that said they were very angry, of course, and they wanted to go get those guys. But they talked them down. We've never done that. We've always worked within the rules of the outside world, so that, because we know we need to fit in. And so this is what it probably looked like. This is not an exact photo, but this is October 15th, 1900. It's a day that we memorialize every year with a walk that we do. So that night, everybody there had to find shelter. 2 miles away, two of their families had log cabins on another road off of the reservation, the village area. They went over there, and these two families and everybody together got shelter, got clothing, got food, got everything for all of them for the winter. They made it through the winter. I have no idea how, because if you burn down my house, you have also burned down all of the corn that I've harvested, and I have that dried for summer, and the deer meat and the fish smoked, and all of the crops have been dried, and berries, everything. You have now burned down everything I own and all of our food, and we can't just go to the grocery store and get more. Not in those days. So how they did it, I don't know, but they did. Now, this woman's name is Nagani. The local paper had an article, and that she is a very old woman. The paper says we don't know if she's like 97 or 107 because she doesn't know exactly because she didn't have a birth certificate back when she was born. But she's very elderly, and her family was in Cross Village. So some people who had family in Cross Village, they went on and they had to walk to Cross Village. So most of the people 2 miles away, that's where they settled. And our memorial walk is from the old spot to the new spot. And we do that every year. She and a few people walked across Village. She's very elderly. A few days later, she passed away. It was just not something she knew she'd have to do. She was not in any kind of shape to be able to do it, but she had to do it. And so it was a hard, hard time. Now this is a man, and we have in our archives, we have him as younger man and older man, Albert Shenandoah. And the younger picture, you'll see behind him, he is standing in front of a backdrop that has the Capitol building from Washington, D.C. behind him. While that is just a backdrop, he did go to Washington, D.C., and when he went there, he was looking for who do I need to talk to tell about what has happened. And so we were trying to write letters to Washington, tell them what happened, or to the state of Michigan. Anyone we could figure out, write letters, have other people write letters for us, and there were neighbors in the area who did write letters for us as well. Trying to get someone's attention. Now, Albert did not get any answers, but he gave it a good try. Now, this is a family, just to show you another nice family picture. This picture is probably more in the 1920s. So this is a few years later, but this is Henry Massey now is in the middle. He was a younger man in some of our other photos. And it looks like it's a nice, probably a church day, and they have their beautiful white dresses on and their suits, and it's a very good-looking family. Many, many people that Mr. Massey had around, loved ones he had around him. So once they burned our property, then we had to move. John McGinn started selling plots, and this was the first thing he did. Was he built his own house, very different from the houses that we lived in. This man was just so desperate to have our land. He certainly didn't need the land, but he built a big, beautiful house. The next thing he did this is the Colonial Hotel on Burt Lake, and it was on the point. It only was there for about 10 years because all of the big hotels at that time were made of wood, and it burned down, as did many of them. We didn't do it. But it did burn down. But it is beautiful. It's part of history of the lake. So somewhere along the line, the people we'd been trying to talk to and our neighbors helping us too, we did get the attention of the district attorney general, there we go. And they filed a lawsuit on our behalf to remove the cloud on the title. So they filed a lawsuit to say, yes, we're going to get your land back. No, it should not be John McGinn's. And so one peculiar thing about that, as I'm learning about it, is they didn't necessarily tell us when they started the lawsuit. Things would happen on our behalf, but they didn't always tell us about it. And so they didn't think we would understand it. I'm not sure what, but eventually we found out about it. And we have all the records from it. And we know, and some of the people at the time knew it was happening. And so we would have to just wait and find out what happened now in court, what goes on now. It's the same thing that happens today. We have a lawsuit today that I'll be telling you about, and we just have to wait for news, find out what's going on. What happened was they started this lawsuit, and it took many years for this lawsuit to go through. It is, I believe it was at least 4 years to 7, and I don't recall the detail. But what would happen is that the Attorney General and the attorneys for John McGinn, they'd come to court, and so the judge would say, okay, you have 3 months to get all your facts together, and then you're going to come back. When they came back, the Attorney General would be a new guy, and he would say, I just got this job. The other guy moved on to another job. I'm going to need 3 more months to work on this, 6 more months to work on this to come up to speed with the case. And they do these things today still. You might recognize it, some of you. But they just did not have focus enough. The US government we were not a priority. It was very clear. No one was really paying attention. And so that happened several times. Finally, after many years, when it was finally finished, during that time span, John McGinn passed away. Yet still, we had the lawsuit. We had to continue it till the finish. When we finished it, the judge ruled against us. And there's many reasons why he said he did, but there's one, as Richard with his research has helped us, come to that what really happened is there's really, one of the biggest ones, there's a clause that in those papers, those that I showed you for the land, it said, in trust to the governor. That was the line that this judge said, well, that doesn't really mean anything. They owe taxes, they didn't pay it, done. And then further in history, as we tried to, we had other things happening, which I'll talk about. This thing that it was cut and dry, they just refused to use that piece of information. A lot of it was they just weren't paying attention. There were people who were not really, they were researching things. They're supposed to go find out what's this case about, and they're not paying a lot of attention. The book goes into a lot of that detail. But once we lost that land, that reservation land, we have never gotten back. But since then, what happened as the years went by, there came a time when all of the Native American bands could apply to be recognized from the government. And if the government gives you recognition, that means that you are officially a band in their eyes, and there are different programs and things that you will qualify for, such as there are housing programs. Most of the people at the time when they're recognized are usually very poor. There is definitely poverty, very hard to make a living now that the lumbering was gone and jobs moved south. And so there's a lot of things and then you also they give you land if you don't already have some. So we in the 90s, first thing we did is they told us you have to have a government that looks like ours. You can't just have what you say is government. And for us, the way the Ojibwe people just make decisions is we all get together and we talk about it, we come to a consensus. It takes a long time, but it's how we've always done it. Everybody's happy in the end, and it's fair. But they said, no, we want you to have a government that has a chairperson, that has board. So they said, we want you to be a nonprofit organization. So we became a nonprofit organization. Every month we have board meetings, we have a board chair, we have the members, and they vote in the Roberts Rules. We have all the minutes from all that time. And the next step was that you can become a recognized tribe if you can get a bill through Congress, and that they will recognize you. We were put on a bill with 3 other tribes. Those tribes had property and we did not. So we were down there, we were ready for the case. We'd even had people who had testified already, and they took us off the bill because they said, you're different, so we want these 3 tribes to be recognized, and then we'll have a bill for you too. Those tribes got recognized, which is wonderful, and then our bill never came to fruition. We had a change in administration, and nobody at that time was interested in a bill that had to do with Native American recognition, and so we slipped through those cracks. Where am I in the story? So we still today, we will never stop looking for working toward reaffirmation. Where we are now is we applied, there's the last step. We applied in the year 2000s. For the other way that you can become a tribe is you can apply to the BIA. It's a huge process. It takes years to do the research that they need. We did it. You have to work with a historian, a genealogist, different historical researchers. You have to meticulously go through every record of every member and have all of the documentation in there. That's a lot of work, and you have to prove that you've been there for all this time, and it's just a huge amount of work, and we did it. We're a small group, and we did it, and it was a lot. At the time we were ready to submit the application, and the people working with us, they're excited. They're like, aren't you, I've read the oral interviews. They're like, you should be excited. This is gonna happen. And we were denied. The Bureau of Indian Affairs said, they wrote 300 pages as to why we were denied, but it's this nutshell. 3 things. They said, we didn't have many people. Now, part of the application process is they went through our records and they took out people that they didn't think were our band members. They had their own set of rules as to who they thought were band members and not. And so we had to disenroll like about a third of our band before they would look at our application. So we did it. We wanted to look at and it was tough. And there's still people who are very upset about that because their families were knocked off. And yet they denied us. And one of them was we didn't have enough people. We weren't a big group. So that's hit us hard. The other one was we had no land. That hit us hard. We have no land. We had it at one time. We don't anymore. And then the third one says, you haven't proven to us that you've been here continuously since that time. We have 2 cemeteries with people in them. We have families who still come up there. My family every year for a family reunion. We have, people who still live there, that they have lived there continuously. And it's just very, you really get the feeling that they just don't want to do it. So we're never going to stop. That doesn't matter to us. We tried to apply again. They told us that you can't do that. BIA doesn't do that. We sued them to say you should do this. And this was the last 7 years. We've been suing them to say you need to give us, we should have the opportunity to reapply. And that's all we're asking, reapply. And they dragged it on and on and on. They kept coming back. The BIA would come back and say, I just got this case, I need 6 months to work it up. And then you would come back, and again, the next guy would say, you know what, we're not sure what you really want here. And they just produced nothing and did nothing. So now we have just filed a motion that says, judge, you have to make them do it, which is just still a saying, we won, you gotta make them do it. And all we can do is keep filing these. Eventually there'll be a decision made, and it probably will be not to our liking, not to our side, but we've got other plans too. So we'll continue to work for this. The other thing that we move forward now, because while this is what we do, we don't want it to be the only thing we're doing. We also don't want the burnout to be the one thing that defines us. We lost so much culture, as many groups did, because many children were sent to boarding schools, where my great-grandmother was one of them. And so she did not teach her children the language. She did not teach many of the cultural things. The kids were not really encouraged to learn these things. And so we don't have any English language speakers anymore. But we are working on projects where we apply for grants that allow us to do things such as we just had a large grant, or large to us, where we had 12 different teachings on 12 different traditional food, how to harvest wild rice, how to grow a traditional Three Sisters garden, how to spearfish. I'd never done that before. Ice spearfishing, that was fun. How to smelt dip, I'd never done that before. I got 1 fish, but I got it. And I realized I would have been a very skinny Anishinaabe girl in those days. But it's fun. We made a birch bark smoker and smoked fish. I mean, these are things that I would have never done before, and never had any idea how you do them. And we had teachers who came in from other tribes to show us. And so now we've taken that, all of those different things, and we are now publishing a book that we have done research on edible plants and medicinal plants. And so it's a very beautiful book. It's about to be published soon. And then in it also has recipes where you can use some of these traditional foods in more modern recipes. And then it also has stories from our elders, which I just saw the proof of it. And it's beautiful, very pretty, gorgeous photography in it. But so we're working to raise funds, because the other thing we need really bad is we need a community building. We have a 30-year-old trailer, single wide trailer, that is falling apart. We love it because it's the only place we have where we can all meet, and we now just standing room only. We had a meeting yesterday and it was just hot as blazes, standing room only, but we have to have a place or it's very hard for us to stay together. So we're working on raising funds for a whole building. That's going to be a huge learning process for us because we've not done fundraising like that before. So we're really embarking on some bigger things, and it feels good. So the Cloud Over the Land, we do have them available. That is also how we raise funds. Richard donates every penny. The author donates every penny to us. He takes nothing for that, and he's an amazing guy. We are forever grateful. He just won an award for the book from the State Historical Society of Michigan for Best Book of the Year for the self-published category. So we're super excited about that as well. But if you're, we have a website now where we're starting to share some more of our culture and our stories. So if you sign up for the newsletter there, every 3 months we put out a newsletter that talks about some of the harvesting we're doing or just some of the projects we're working on, because we have been hidden for many, many years, and we know that it is our own fault. We have hidden because people didn't believe us. You know, times were very different over the many years. We're coming into a point of time where we have far more acceptance for our diversity in our country. We feel it, and we really feel it. And so this is us coming out and saying we're not gonna hide anymore. If you're interested in knowing about us, you know, we're happy to share our stories and our ways of knowing as we learn them. And then it's a healing process. We need to move so that we're not just focused on the burnout, that we're moving forward. To heal, the first thing you need to be able to do is you need to be able to speak your story and tell your story. And so that's what the book and me here does. The other piece is, the next step is you need to have people who will listen. So I want to say to you in my language, miigwech gabizindawayen, which means thank you for listening. Now I can take questions. Our technical geniuses are going to be doing their stuff. Yes.
I think that painting done by George Catlin.
I gotta ask you to stop because we gotta make sure you're on microphone. She's punching some buttons here.
That painting was by George Catlin.
That's right. I think you're right. That painting of the chief, George Catlin, is a very famous painter from back in those days. And I was floored to find out we had an image of him painted by him. But yes. Yes, in the back.
Best guess, if you were to reapply now, what do you think your band numbers would be, your tribe numbers?
Our tribe, we're very small. Our tribe numbers are, I think, right around 350. And that's a very small group. There's there's a new phase that I think we're moving into. This is just my theory, but that these smaller groups like ourselves, there are reasons why we don't want to be included in the larger groups, and that's because they would include us, but this is our history. It's so different from everybody else, and we operate so well in a small group, so that I'm hoping that there's ways in which we can continue to do our things. And the 501c3 nonprofit organization, which we've been for years, we've never used that to the extent that we can. We're now gaining the tools ourselves to start using that for fundraising and things. So I think that for us, that is a really nice way for us to move forward, where we don't have to get big to still be able to function the way our ancestors did. Any other questions? Thank you very much for listening.
I would like to invite everyone to refreshments that we are providing today for you, and also mention to you that our next program will be in October, and it will be a combination of three things. First, the Michigan History Day students that won finalist awards at the national level will be here speaking on their projects, which is a delightful opportunity to see what middle school and high school students of our area do about history. Secondly, there will be fun activities about learning about local history that we will have for you. And then at the very end, there will be a very short annual meeting for the society members and anyone who would like to participate. So we urge you to consider coming to us back to this room in October. All the information is on our website at traversehistory.org. So please consider that. But please join us for refreshments, and thank you again for coming.